Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here. It's great to all be together in the way that we can be together these days. So thank you all for taking time. I know you're busy. I know this is starting to feel like a very, very busy part of the semester, and it is. And it's great to see everyone. I want to just start by acknowledging that this is a pretty heavy time for a lot of people. We're dealing with a lot. Many members of our community have loved ones in Ukraine. We're dealing with, we're not done with the pandemic. We're still dealing with sickness and loss. And we have a lot on all of our minds, individually and most importantly, collectively. So I can't think of a better way to handle the heaviness and the challenges than making things better together. So I'll start by saying what gives me a little bit of hope and what gets me excited. I spent much of the last few days participating in the Higher Ed Labor United Summit, also known as HELU. Many of you were there. It was fantastic and also hopeful. It was truly, truly hopeful. So this is a movement of campus-based unions and faculty associations, some with no collective bargaining rights, coming together to organize wall to wall, coast to coast, as we say it. I first heard our member Ian Gavigan frame it that way, and I can't get it out of my mind. The work we're doing is wall to wall on our campuses, and it is coast to coast. And I'm really excited to build together and build here at Rutgers and build in this larger movement. So as we think about everything we're dealing with, I think the things that can keep us going are organizing together and organizing for a transformative contract that improves the lives of everybody here, our faculty, our grads, our staff, our students, our community members and neighbors. We really are fighting for something transformative that reflects our true values. And so as we move forward and get into much more specific things, I hope we can think about this as something that's a place for hope and optimism, and where there's we all know there's room for improvement, and we know the only way we're going to get it is if we do it together. So I'm really excited to be here, to be kicking off a contract campaign. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take every single one of you, and we're going to get what we deserve and what we need here at Rutgers. We're going to get into a lot of specifics as we develop our contract demands. What we want to do here is we'll have some talking up top, but most of the time will be really for discussion, because we want to hear from you about what you think we should be thinking about as we finalize our contract demands and then get to the bargaining table. So we'll have a lot of time for your thoughts and your comments. Let me say a few technical things about how things are going to work. We'll go until we'll do about an hour and a quarter. So we'll end at 7:15. And we'll hopefully keep it lively and interactive. Something different technically, we're gonna have the chat be a place for chatting. So usually we ask people who want to speak to write stack in the chat. This is going to be big change for all of us. We're actually going to use the Zoom raise your hand. I'll remind you of this when we get to the to hearing questions and comments, but we're going to use a raise hand so that people can really chat in the chat. So say what you think, sound off. We have a lot of folks here who are on our executive council, on our bargaining committee, on our organizing and action team, who will be able to comment. We have many of our chapter leaders here who will be able to comment, share links, provide hopefully useful information. But as we're going through, please do chat in the chat and use that to sort of say what you're thinking and what's on your mind. We'll also, partway through, after we've had some time to discuss things, we will give a feedback form that's different from the sign-in form. So please go ahead and sign in now, and then we'll have the opportunity to give feedback on all the different issues we're talking about, so that we can take some of these, hand them back to the committees that are working on them, and get people's ideas, people's priorities, people's goals, people's hopes, get that all together. So that's the sort of, that's the mechanics. I need to thank, as ever, our union staff, who are amazing and are the reason that this is happening and that we're all here. And Alan Moss has been really heroic in juggling numerous things, but making sure we stay on track and are where we need to be in terms of communicating and talking about what we really need to talk about together tonight. So I want to thank our staff and especially Alan. I'm going to screen share in a minute and go through some highlights of the contract demands that we're developing. A bunch of your other elected leaders will briefly go over those, and then we'll move to questions and discussions. So that's how we're going to do it. I want to say that our contract demands reflect years of talking, of thinking, and of work. Some of them, those of you that have been around for one or two or more contract cycles will recognize them. These are not all new. These are some things that we've needed to fight for some time, and that we hope to organize enough that we can actually win now. So some of these will be familiar to some of you, and some of these will be new, and we'll have, I hope, plenty of time for questions and discussions. Close to 2,000 of you filled out a survey in the fall. I want to thank the folks that led on our survey: Jamie Dunayev, Andy Urban, and Heather Chalella. They may all three be on here, and they just did fantastic work in terms of helping us make sure that we have a good assessment, a good understanding of what people are dealing with, but what people's priorities are, and what we're willing to organize and fight for. So I want to thank our survey team for all of their work. I think I'm going to go ahead and screen share now. And so I won't be able to see the chat, but you all should still give feedback in the chat, and get us to, I have to find the right screen. There we go. Get us to a sort of summary of our highest level demands, so that we can start to talk about them. This is not a comprehensive set of our demands. This is what I think of as the headline demands, the big demands. And so you're going to probably have questions. There's going to be stuff that we don't cover here, but it doesn't mean we're not also proposing it. And let's get into it when we get to our discussion. So I guess I'll start with what is probably on many folks' minds, which is our economic demand. What are we going to do about a pay raise? What we're going to do is demand a just and fair salary increase. Now, you might notice that there's no number attached to that. There's a reason. We're working with the coalition unions, and we're also, our financial analysis is ongoing. And so in late March, you will be invited to an event. I think Rutgers has the money, where Howard Bunsis, who's done terrific work, multiple contract cycles for us, will present a forensic financial analysis of Rutgers finances. And so we'll talk about what we want to put together in terms of an economic demand. What is a reasonable pay increase? And how do we want that to reflect our values in terms of making sure that we're keeping pace with inflation, making sure that grad workers have a living wage. Many of you are aware of the transformative pay increase that was given to Princeton grad workers in our same part of the country with the same cost of living. That will be one of the benchmarks we'll be using. And then we will be fighting to eliminate the fiscal emergency provision. That's the provision that replaced the hated subject to language, for those of you who've been here a while, but that was used to withhold our raises when the pandemic hit. And eventually that declaration of fiscal emergency was withdrawn due to all of your work and all of our organizing together. But we will be working to remove that provision so that there's no out in our pay increase. We need our pay increases to be contractual. The second area that I'm going to highlight is a pathway to tenure for our teaching intensive NTTs, creating a tenure process, opt-in for those who want it. It's not required, but an opt-in process so that those who are teaching intensive also have access to the security of tenure. And that's going to be absolutely pivotal to our fight. And making sure that all of the security that goes with tenure is not only confined to the few. So that's going to be a crucial piece of our contract campaign. We have many NTT leaders on this call. We had a great NTT town hall, I think last week, maybe it was the week before. And there will be many more opportunities for input on that as well. I want to kick to Donna Murch, who's going to talk about our race and gender equity demands. So Donna, go ahead. Oh, there you go.
Thank you so much, Becky, and thank you so much for all of your hard work. I also want to shout out just how amazing Helu was, the 4-day summit. It was incredible, and it made me really energized and excited about our contract campaign, as well as this nationwide solidarity work. So I want to talk a little bit about our race and gender equity demands. Last Monday, a week from today, we had our Freedom School about Camden Matters, and it went really well. I put a link to it in the chat, and I encourage you to go look at it and also consider subscribing to the Rutgers AAUP Freedom School. That really is kind of the public archive of the union, so you'll get all the updates. This town hall, in fact, will be posted there as well. So core issues. Equity for Camden Matters. This is going to be at the center of our contract campaign coming up this summer and fall. At the center of it is the idea that all of our campuses should be treated equally, and that the distribution of funds through RCM is unfair. And despite Camden producing more revenue through student tuition, it is being starved of resources. So at the top of our racial equity demands are abolish the debt and fix the funding. And Jim Brown, our wonderful chapter leader, is going to talk about campus equity in more detail. So I'll leave some of the details of that to him. The second major race and gender demand is faculty oversight of the pay equity process. As you all know, we won our pay equity provision in our contract in 2019, but the administration insisted on hiring Jackson Lewis, one of the most important national anti-labor law firms. And this battle continues to have pay equity implemented. But at the center of this is a fight over their use of an anti-labor law firm's algorithm that is making decisions that violate the contract. So we're going to push for faculty oversight of the pay equity process. You know, one thing I think we've all learned watching this process from 2019 is that we win things at the bargaining table, but then we have to continue to fight to have them implemented. And that's true for the grad extension, and that's true for the pay equity process as well. Third core racial and gender demand is the Educational Opportunity Fund +6. And the EOF fund is a really important program that we have that serves low-income students from the state of New Jersey, disproportionately Black and Brown. And it provides special supports for undergraduates. Currently, we have some funding channeled to master's programs, but we want to see EOF +6, expanding the Educational Opportunity Fund so that it will cover full doctoral programs. And this is a way to also think about diversifying the graduate programs at Rutgers and making sure that students that come from our 3 campuses, Camden, Newark, and New Brunswick, are also represented in the graduate programs. So we might think of this as also a bridge demand to our communities. The final one is the remuneration of uncompensated labor. Along with Deepa Kumar, Carlos Tecenas, and others. I sit on the University Diversity Committee, which was created again from the 2019 contract. It was a new idea that you would have a University Diversity Committee dictated by a union contract that was part labor and part administrative. And one of the core things that we've been pushing for is a program that will provide funding for a diverse faculty who are doing diversity work, for them to be compensated for that work. This was one in the California Teachers Association contract recently. They called it a cultural tax, but the idea is that the additional work that scholars of color are required to do for diversity work, that this is something that should be compensated. So we're working towards that, and also towards the expansion for graduate students of graduate fellowships, both entry-level fellowships and, very importantly, dissertation level fellowships. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Becky.
I'll mention this thing, although Donna's actually well equipped, and others here to talk about it. Donna mentioned the University Committee on Diversity, Race, and Gender, and there are implementation issues on that, which we can get into if you'd like. And I think Deepak Kumar is here, and we can talk about that. But the important thing is that we need better contract language to make the role of that committee more enforceable, more significant. So looking at accountability and disclosure. So when the university says they're spending money on equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives, we need to know where the money goes, and we need to understand if that's actually supporting those supposed goals. The other piece on race and gender equity that I just want to highlight is caregiver support. This fits into a number of different areas in our contract. This is really inspired by the work of the Caregiver Task Force. Some of our Newark members have been way out in front of this, done just fantastic research on what we need, and also what other institutions are doing. So some of the areas of caregiver support that we'll be demanding, one is a caregiver allowance. So for those with caregiving responsibilities, actually a subsidy. We saw the grad workers at Columbia won that, and we'll be making that demand. Also subsidized backup care, that looks something like a care.com premium membership. Some of you may be familiar with. It's sometimes offered as an employee benefit. It gives you the opportunity for a certain number of days a year to have backup care when maybe your kid's school is closed for quarantine, for example, or there's an unexpected need for care. So subsidized backup care. Dependent care travel allowance. There's a number of ways that could work, but basically additional support for people with caregiving responsibilities who need to travel as part of their job. If you have an infant and you need to go to a conference, you may need to spend money on childcare. You may need to bring someone with you to help with childcare. Just making sure that you're able to fulfill your job responsibilities and your caregiving responsibilities, and getting the support you need for that. So the idea is to have a dependent care travel allowance for people who are traveling, and then increasing parental leave so that there's a longer leave available than what we currently have in the contract, which is 6 weeks for those who give birth and 8 weeks for any parent for bonding. And so those are the pieces of the caregiver support, which we see as really equity demands. I want to turn over to Jim Brown, who is going to talk about campus equity. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Becky. Thanks to everyone who's done such great work on all of this. Thank you to Donna and to Keith Green for setting up the the Freedom School on Campus Equity, and on Camden in particular. Last week, it was an incredible event, as folks have already said, and it sort of feeds directly into this conversation of the demands around campus equity. You heard a little bit about these already when Donna spoke, and that's because the campus equity demands are intertwined with the racial equity demands because of the sort of way the Camden and Newark campuses look, the students who attend those campuses. So I'll talk just a little bit about those campus equity demands here in just a slight bit of detail. The first you've heard about briefly, which was to abolish the debt that is increasingly, that is talked about all the time when it comes to Camden, the deficit that constantly sort of hangs over the head of Camden and prevents us from spending money, from hiring, from building the very programs that they say we need to increase our enrollments, et cetera, et cetera. But in addition to fixing that debt, which I should say both the chancellor of our campus and the president of the university have said both that they want to do that they agree that RCM is inequitable when it comes to funding campuses. And in fact, President Holloway, during his visit to Camden recently, went so far as to say that it essentially doesn't matter that deficit is there, that every unit operates at a deficit. And so we're making too much of this deficit. All those things are great things to hear, but we need to see actual action on this problem. And so the second piece of that is to fix the funding model that creates the deficit. So erasing the debt is important. Making that deficit go away is important, but we have to solve the root problem, which is how funding is determined. And there's a number of different ways to fix that funding model, but we need to think sort of critically about how the system that we're currently operating under, excuse me, is a major equity problem for Camden and Newark. We also have, you'll see the second bullet there is a one-time pay increase for Camden and Newark Arts and Sciences faculty. If you look at the sort of pay inequities between campuses, you'll see they're stark when you compare Camden to New Brunswick and also then Newark to New Brunswick. As you'll see in the chart on the slide, the gaps are slightly different based on the campuses. But when you really drill down into those numbers, what you learn is that the major gaps exist at the arts and sciences, the colleges of arts and sciences. So if you take out things like nursing, business, and law, at least on the Camden campus, you see the numbers that you see right here on your screen that, the average assistant professor on the tenure track in Camden starts at basically 30% less than someone at New Brunswick, pardon me. And that gap continues to repeat itself over and over as you sort of move up the chain. There are also gaps at other sort of in other job classifications and ranks, but not to the extent that you're seeing here in this chart. And so the idea is to begin to solve that problem with a one-time pay increase for this group of faculty at both Camden and Newark. And then a last piece of this is something that I think is often overlooked, which is, the contract has kind of salary minimums in it, right? So that there is a minimum salary that management can offer an incoming person at each rank. And those salaries are, in fact, what is typically offered to someone hired in, I know this happens in Camden, I assume it happens often in Newark as well. And so, but at New Brunswick, that is not the starting number. And in fact, the minimum tends to be much higher, which is why you see the numbers that you see on the screen. And so we want to think more about the equity of those salary minimums, or to create sort of meaningful salary minimums that would actually sort of represent something that management actually sort of follows equitably across campuses. And so I'll stop there, Becky, and kick it back to you.
Thank you so much, Jim. That's great. That's a really good overview. I want to turn it over to Sarah DeGeorgis, who's going to talk about some of the grad demands, especially the funding demand here. So thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So there are kind of two important pieces here. One are the extensions that we've been talking about, which are for grads who have been impacted by the pandemic and are running out of funding. We're kind of treating those right now as a separate issue, just because many people are running out of funding at the end of this semester. So we need to figure something out very quickly. You may have gotten a survey last week about kind of what your experience was with these extensions. And we're actually having a follow-up meeting on Wednesday at 1 that any grad is welcome to come to talk about kind of what were our next steps with the extensions. So that's obviously a very important thing. Right now, for our as far as the contract is concerned, we're thinking of funding more of like, we just need 5 years of guaranteed funding. That would take a lot of pressure off of especially lower income doctoral students, just to know that you have the 5 years, you have the health insurance that comes along with that. And yes, I'm hoping that Jacob can put the I'm not sure if we have a link, but yeah, anyone who wants to come to our extension funding meeting, please let me or Jacob know. But for the contract demands, just basically 5 years of guaranteed funding. And we will, of course, we need to talk about salary. As you saw on the first slide, I think our salary is below cost of living. So yeah, and we are, we're very conscious that Princeton has given their grads a lot more money. So yeah, we will be talking about that. But our contract demands are still, our bargaining demands, we're still kind of working on them. So again, if you are interested in helping out, let me know or let Jacob know.
Thank you so much, Sarah. The next area that I'll mention is research and principal investigator support. There's a lot of issues, a lot of needs for research faculty, and especially those who are the recipients of grants. So 2 key areas that we think are essential for research and PI support. One is reducing the fringe rate. It's not only very high, but it's higher than any of our peer institutions. For those of you who don't know, that's the rate that the university takes off the top of grants. Much of that is used for things that we believe in, like benefits and buildings and libraries, but the rate is not on a par with our peer institutions, and it's a problem. It means that our research faculty can't do with their grants what their peers elsewhere can do. In that vein, we also want to establish a bridge fund. There is, I believe, a holy bridge fund, I'll say, where that some research folks have access to, but a bridge fund so that principal investigators who are between grants have funding support. When they don't have funding support, it means they may not be able to support grad workers. They may need to lay off staff. They may not have funding for NTTs that have worked there for some time successfully. It's a huge problem, and it doesn't support the research and innovation that the university supposedly wants us to all be doing. So the bridge fund is critical, especially to those that are in that world of large grants and research groups. The next area is going to stay on me. Academic freedom and governance. Many of you are probably thinking a lot about academic freedom issues now. It's very much in the news from attacks on course content. I think Wyoming legislature today voted to ban gender studies, both the discipline and any content in any discipline. I don't think that will be implemented, but we're seeing massive attacks, critical race theory, of course, being foremost in our minds, but also, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas wanting to take away tenure. So we want to make sure that the right to academic freedom is enforceable and in our contract, not just something that the university states, but that it's in there sustainably in an enduring and enforceable way. We also need to make improvements to the problem that I think this quote from one of our survey respondents just sums up absolutely perfectly, right? Our jobs, those of us that are faculty, are constantly changing because our administrative requirements are increasing, and we're having to do more and more administration, and we're having to be available for ever-changing teaching schedules because of InfoSylum, now known as Course Atlas. these changes that significantly diminish our abilities to do the core functions of our job are just imposed on us. So we'll be demanding that when those changes happen, whether it's a software change, whether it's a reduction in administrative staff for your department, and you have to take on that administrative work, that those changes should be negotiable and that those should be subject to negotiation. On health and safety, we're going to be working, of course, with our coalition unions. We all work in the same workplaces, but we'll be demanding something that will probably look fairly simple. It's an enforceable right to a safe workplace. We ostensibly have the right to a safe workplace now, but we don't have good enforcement teeth. And so we'll be working to beef up that enforcement. So for example, if it's not safe for you to work on campus, either because it's not safe for any of us because we're in a pandemic surge, or because of your specific vulnerabilities or healthcare needs, we will be demanding that we all have the right to a safe workplace. Todd Wolfson is going to hit our common good demands next. So I will hand over to Todd. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Hey, everyone. It's good to see so many beautiful faces. Yeah, as Becky said at the top, over the weekend, we were part of a Higher Ed Labor United Summit, which focused on, and Becky flagged this, a wall-to-wall, coast-to-coast movement that can build the power necessary to fight the crisis in front of us in higher ed. And the next two areas of our contract campaign are the way we want to do that work here at home, right? And so, how do we build the power necessary? So in our mind, it's alignment to demand a Rutgers that's not just for full-time faculty and grad workers and postdocs and counselors who are in our unit, but for all workers at this university, as well as students and the community. And we believe that's not only the moral way forward, but it's also the way forward to build the right kind of transformational power to get this done. So the first area is alignment with students and community. And that's what we're calling common good demands, goods that lift up our work with communities and with students to help build a shared vision of the university we need. So I'll just name three that we're thinking about right now. The first is we've been in dialogue both with community groups, particularly in New Brunswick, and we need more dialogue with community groups in Newark and Camden on this particular issue, as well as students. And we found that there's a real concern around housing. And so we want to make a demand that there's rent stabilization. We're still working on these pieces, but some sort of focused demand around rent stabilization in New Brunswick in particular, but also in Camden and Newark, because New Brunswick, Rutgers is the largest landlord in New Brunswick. It would both bring down the rents or flatten the rents for our undergrads and for our international grad students, but it would also bring down the entire rental market for all the people living in New Brunswick, which is a majority Spanish-speaking undocumented community. So that's one thing we're working on with community groups. A second one is we want to have Rutgers end withholding transcripts. So let me say more about this. Now, we've seen this in the news. Each campus at Rutgers is now touting free tuition, which is great for our vulnerable students. But at the same time that they're on one hand touting this free tuition, the university delays graduation by denying registration for classes and access to diplomas and transcripts for sometimes the smallest, most pernicious fees, fines, and unpaid bills that our students get here at Rutgers. So we are calling on Rutgers to be even more revolutionary by abolishing all student debt within the system, tuition, student fees, and any other unpaid fees, fines, and bills, and also to stop from not giving and withholding transcripts and registration. And I'll just say one other piece on this that I feel, pretty unhappy with Rutgers about, which is that we have been working with a group called the Debt Collective for over 6 months. They approached Becky and I. They have a large chunk of money they would like to bring and give to Rutgers for free. Give to the Rutgers administration for free to cancel, to stop these unpaid fees and make sure that students who have them erase those fees. And Rutgers has not even responded to them. So the last part of the common good demand is we want polling places for our undergrads and grads and on our campuses and for all of us. We think that the folks should be able to vote, and this should be something we should work on with the administration to set up. So those are our common good demands. And finally, I'm going to talk about our One Faculty campaign. And first, I need to flag, we have some amazing leaders from the PTLFC, which has now renamed itself. I think it's the Rutgers Adjunct Union, or something along those lines. I'm sorry if I got it wrong, but I just want to flag, we have Amy Heiger here, the president of the PTLFC, amazing leader. I saw Dan Sidoric as well in the room. And then also with Biomedical Health Sciences, New Jersey, AAUP, I saw Kathy Monteleone, who's the president there, also an amazing and important leader, as well as Dio, who is the executive director, and there may be others, so I'm sorry if I missed you. So the One Faculty campaign is a campaign that is saying that we all deserve a one-tier system, right? Whether you're an adjunct, whether you're a non-tenure track faculty member, whether you're a tenure stream faculty member here or in the biomedical health, we need to be understood and respected as one faculty. And so we're trying to merge, and our goal will be a card check campaign with the PTLFC, where they get a majority of cards, and the same with our BHS and J brothers and sisters, where they get a majority of cards. And once they do, we are demanding that Rutgers University voluntarily recognize us all as one union, voluntarily. They do not press some court case. They recognize the rights and justness of us all being in one union, and they acknowledge and voluntarily recognize that. So that's the big One Faculty campaign and demand around that. And then I'll just flag really briefly, and since Amy and others are here, if we are in Q&A on these questions, hopefully they can jump in. But the PTLFC or adjunct demand is pay parity. So per credit, they are paid as much as the base pay for an NTT per credit. Also, job security, longer, better contracts, and health insurance. And they deserve these things. They have been fighting. They are the backbone of this university, like us, all of us, but they are asked to teach and do all sorts of unpaid work, and we have to stop that now. Alongside the PTLFC demands, the medical faculty demands are end union busting at Robert Wood Johnson's medical school. What the university is doing, particularly Chancellor Strom and his cutthroat friends, is that they are hiring outside the unit in an attempt to break the medical faculty union. We will not stand for that, and we will stand with them either as they become part of our union or separately. They are also trying to attack their tenure. The BHS and J leaders also and members also want longer NTT appointments and a pathway to tenure like we're looking for. So those are our common good and One Faculty demands. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And we have here Gimble modeling how you should stand in solidarity with us and where you can follow us. So that's always good. I'm always happy to look at our wonderful solidarity dogs and cats. I'm going to stop screen sharing and ask folks to go ahead and raise their hands and sorry, I'm having trouble seeing people, but raise your hands, use the Zoom hand raise, and we will get some discussion going. So I really want to hear from everybody what your thoughts are, what your concerns are, what areas you want us to think through more or provide more detail on. I know there was very, very little detail. So we really want to hear from you, and I'll say, go ahead and raise your hand. We're not necessarily going to go through in order. We're going to try to use progressive stack, but a little bit modified for those of you that are on the EC or are in other committees and spaces where we have good opportunity to hear from you. We might take others first because we know we'll get a chance to have a discussion in our leadership bodies. So I'm not necessarily going in order, but I will take people from raising their hand, and then please do go ahead and keep commenting in the chat. And I'll just say in a couple minutes, we'll also put in our feedback form so you can weigh in on issues, and hopefully you guys can come on camera. Sonal, do you want to jump in with your thoughts?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sonal, and I'm representing the Rutgers Graduate Student Association at the New Brunswick campus. And I wanted to know if the union is doing anything to protect graduate students in cases of workplace and Title IX cases?
Yeah, so I might ask Todd to jump in. Do you want to say a bit more about if you have particular thoughts? I will say that as part of the Higher Ed Labor United Summit, we were on panels with some of the amazing Harvard grad workers who have really centered fixing the process that is currently in place for for grads, and not just grads, but who are the victims of harassment and other similar issues. And we want to work to get that to a place where there's actually a process that works. We believe that it is our job as a union to fight harassment and to ensure that there is a safe workplace. And I'll just say personally, and others have heard me say this before, I do not believe that you need to be opposed to due process in order to fight sexual harassment. I think it is essential that we fight harassment. So I don't know, Sonal, if you want to say anything more about the kinds of processes that you would hope to see in our contract proposals that we'll organize for, or we can of course follow up. But if you have specifics there, you should feel free to start sharing them now.
So I guess I don't really know what's the effective way is, but I know in the past recent weeks, as a GSA member, I've heard about workplace as well as Title IX cases across multiple departments, which are part of the School of Graduate Studies in the New Brunswick. And sometimes the students have complained to the department chairs, and sometimes they haven't. But in some cases, the department chairs haven't done anything. And I guess the issue is more prevalent in fields that do field work. And I think that's why the students are kind of afraid of, taking any actions because of all the repercussions. Like as a graduate student, our degrees are on the line. Having bad recommendation letter, not being able to find a job or a field work. So it was really mind-boggling to see so many cases just come up in the past few weeks. And I have been talking to the Office of Student Affairs and School of Graduate Studies, but the issue is there are offices, there's like someone who works from the HR side, but there are people who work from student affairs side. But I think what a graduate student wants is some sort of confidentiality, and those offices don't give that. So yeah, those were just my thoughts. If, somehow, like if union could help the graduate students, and like I said, I don't really know what's the effective way. Probably collaborating with like different organizations, School of Graduate Studies, Office of Student Affairs might be a good way to lead. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
So now I think Evan's making the point in the chat that I think we want to look at here. So as Becky was saying, Harvard Grad Students United, which is the grad workers union, has done some really, I think they're out front in the country on this, and they did a lot of work demanding and winning independence. And that's the way they're approaching Title IX is independent third-party arbitrators, lawyers representing people in these suits, et cetera, which is slightly different. But anyway, we are setting up a meeting with them. I don't know if Audrey's on this call, but she'll be in that meeting, and BJ Walker. And so now we'd love to have you join if you want to. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. You send me an email, and then we'll make sure you're part of the meeting with Harvard Grad Students United to learn from their strategy and then to develop our strategy in correspondence with it. Does that work for you?
Yes, I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you so much. Deborah, go ahead.
Hi, so thank you, first of all, for letting me speak. I want to speak, I want to request the consideration of a language change. So those of us who are full-time teaching faculty are not non-anything. So I would appreciate that change being recognized in union language so that the full-time teaching faculty are referred to as full-time teaching faculty rather than non-tenure track faculty, which sets up a balance which, has repercussions. And the second prong of my point, about the repercussions. If you're talking about a healthy workspace and an equitable workspace, those of us who are teaching faculty have no access to the, I don't know whether you want to call it a luxury or the basic of office space. So at the moment, for example, office space, which becomes even more of an issue under the question of what is health and safety. Research faculty are designated office spaces, which they use, rarely, I'm going to say from my experience of like surveying this, whereas those of us who are teaching faculty are on campus more often because we are 3-4 days a week on campus. So I would like the union to study the use of office space and to consider the possibility that the research faculty should stand in solidarity with the teaching faculty and consider the possibility of more rationally distributing and sharing office space so that those of us who are on campus to teach undergraduate students full-time have a safe, private place from which we can work, which at the moment we do not.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And those are both equity-based demands as far as I'm concerned, and absolutely not continuing with the terminology. I mean, if we're able to organize and win tenure for teaching intensive faculty, then the name non-tenure track is even becomes even less relevant. But regardless, I think it's important that we understand that that's not helpful and not respectful. I think that's absolutely right. And as far as the office space thing, I think it might be something that we want to look at in terms of equal treatment of everyone on here. I don't know if any of our currently NTT leaders want to get in on this. I know our NTT Vice President Carla Katz is not able to be here, although she may be able to follow up with you. But I see many folks on the EC who have been doing tremendous work. If any of them want to jump in, they should quickly raise your hand and I'll call on you. But I want to thank you for that, Deborah. That's really good. And I'll let Paul jump in and give some thoughts on these issues. Thanks, Paul.
No problem. Very quick. Basically, just to echo exactly what Deborah just said then, the same issues. We're a group loosely defined by what we're not, which creates as many problems as it does brings us together as we try and think of ways forward. For some people, it's concrete steps that may make up tenure, but the idea that we in the classroom in front of hundreds of people deserve the same basic protections that an angry physicist does on Twitter after a night on the wine, I think is fair enough. But also, yes, that we are all working with. I think Kathleen Shannon's been our point staff person with a lot of the NTT work, but Carla's leading some, we're trying to work around these demands, and anyone who wants to join across all 3 campuses to help diversify is very welcome.
Thanks. And yeah, it fits right in with the One Faculty campaign, understanding that everybody who does the work of faculty at this university on any of our campuses deserves equal treatment and the same protections. I'm going to go to, I think it's Rebecca Kunkel on here. I just have your last name.
Yeah, thank you. That's right. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about and I'm sorry to keep using the same terminology, but the NTT to tenure track language, and you explained that as being teaching intensive. I mean, I'm in the library, so I'm thinking specifically about libraries and what that means for librarians, but if you could talk a little bit more about it generally. Thank you.
I'll respond, and if others want to jump in as well, but we have models for a path to tenure for teaching intensive folks, and that's what we're working with. And what we're thinking about is what does better job security look like for folks that are currently non-tenure track faculty appointments, but who aren't in teaching positions, which is we have research folks, we have library folks, we have, a number of different types of work that people do that are currently in non-tenure eligible positions. And so this needs to be you know, thought through some more, and we're still in a phase of developing campaigns. So after I speak, you should respond and tell us your thoughts. And then I'll also encourage people to give feedback in writing if they prefer. But something that looks like presumptive renewal, essentially ongoing contracts, so that you don't have to be reappointed and renewed, and something that feels deeply evaluative and contingent, but something that is the understanding is that if there's not cause for non-renewal, you will be renewed. That's the vein we're looking at. So you should get in and respond, Rebecca.
Yeah, I mean, like what I am specifically thinking about is like there is a tenure track for librarians currently. So is this going to, you know, I don't see there being like a problem with, you know, having an option for people to move on to the tenure track who are non-tenure track currently. You know, certainly, you know, for people who don't want to do that, strengthening the renewal of the contract would be great, but I don't see why there wouldn't be an option for people who, you know, they're not teaching faculty because their main category of evaluation is librarianship, but you know, it's tenure for librarians is still a thing.
Yeah, and Angela Lawrence from the libraries is on our bargaining committee and has been working with our library members to make sure we get good input. Ruth Ann Robbins from the law school is going to share how that presumptive renewal works in the law school, in case I think that might be helpful to hear. Thanks, Ruth Ann.
You're welcome. And I'll put my hand down. Oh, I can talk and lower hand at the same time. So in the law school, we have something called presumptively renewable long-term contracts. And the reason we have it is because it's part of the ABA's requirements for law schools. But what it means is when my contract is up after 5 years, like it was this past year, I did not go through a big review process. I simply wrote up, look, this is what I've been doing for the last 5 years. A committee said, that's great. We're not going to start any kind of non-renewal process. And the faculty didn't vote. It was just an acknowledgement in a faculty meeting that there was a recommendation I continue on. And although, you know, writing a memo every 5 years is a little bit annoying, and signing the contract every 5 years is a little bit annoying, it's certainly better than having to go through a very complex review process of people coming in to watch my teaching and judging whether or not I'm, you know, more useful than getting, I keep saying, new patio furniture at the back of the law school. So I think that that's the kind of better treatment that somebody who has a contract now can get than what the university currently has. And you can see all of that in the current contract. There's a special carve out at the back. I think it's appendix 27 or something, like article 27. I don't, there's a 27 in there somewhere, but it is spelled out in the contract, so you can see how the law school has it now if you're interested.
Thank you so much, Ruth Ann. So just, I mentioned this briefly and it's in the chat and we'll put it in there again. We do have a form where you can just click a link and fill out your particular feedback, questions, comments, concerns by issue, as we've sort of group them together today. So please do that. Please fill out that feedback, and that will be really helpful as we move things forward. Bob Boykus, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the one faculty initiative is extremely important. I think looking on a bigger scale, I think that higher education in the United States is in real trouble because of movement to faculty who have no job security. Because they have no job security, they have no academic freedom. Because they have no job security, they don't get health benefits, they don't get salaries. And I think probably the most important thing we can do is get to one faculty. And everybody's making a high mass out of tenure, but tenure is simply, you can't be fired without just cause. And if you put it that way, why is it so strange to give somebody who's teaching full time the ability not worry about being fired unless he or she does something that means moral turpitude or something like that. So I think that should be one of our biggest initiatives. And interestingly enough, I had an exchange with President Barchi, who told me that PTLs don't have academic freedom outside the classroom. And I think that reflects the thinking in higher education administration in the United States. And so, you know, I'm really happy to hear that that's going to be one of our focuses.
Thank you so much, Bob. And Bob co-chairs, along with Kathleen Farley, our Academic Freedom Committee that's been doing really, really important work, as well as helping put together some of these contract proposals. I want to go to Michelle Gittleman. Michelle, you've been waiting a while. Thank you.
No, that's fine. This has been a great discussion, and thank you so much for the really excellent presentations. I guess I have can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I guess I have a question about framing. And so I feel like when we come and framing this within a vision of what the university, what our vision is. And so I feel like when we come to them, they're going to say, oh yeah, we want all of this stuff too, but of course we don't have any money for it. And, you know, Howard Bunce's aside, I kind of feel like Holloway was signaling to us already about this when he gave his speech to the Senate. And he said, look, I don't care what you say, don't touch athletics. I'm not gonna budge a dime because they are the magic that makes the whole place happen. And to me, it was almost an invitation to go after athletics. And so, he was very transactional when we talked about libraries. He's like, well, you know, if we have the money, yes, no, but athletics was the sacred cow. And so I'm wondering how much we want to talk about the sacred cows in our framing of our demands and our vision, namely athletics, but I would also add building, because listening to the med school presentation, the amount of capital expenditure going into new buildings was mind-blowing, and that's going to be debt on everybody's ledger, and it's not clear how we or the patients that they care for, you know, will benefit from it. So I just, in terms of framing, how do we want to think about these things that are being sucking up so much money?
Yeah.
Oh, and I just want to say one more thing, that even though Holloway said, even if we cut athletics, it's only 2% of the budget, that was such BS, because 2% of the budget is actually a really lot of money. So just want to say that.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to encourage others. I really appreciate those comments, and that's exactly what we need to be thinking through and talking about together. So I want to actually ask people to respond on that point. Raise your hand and get in there on that. I do want to echo Todd. I hope we'll hear from some more of our amazing grads who I know are here in terms of what your priorities are and what we can do together. So we do still have about 15 minutes. Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to go to Deepa, our fearless past president. Go ahead, Deepa.
Thank you, Becky. I just want to clarify 2 points that I put in the chat box. One has to do with pay equity. Becky laid out how we are in the process of getting a pay equity process. But, and that's great, because we'll finally have a process and we'll have a committee that, you know, we get to appoint 3 people to and so forth. But really the model that the Pay Equity Committee has been working with is the equivalent of what the PRC is. The PRC is the Promotion Review Committee. They are the final voice on people getting tenure and promotion. And the BOG pretty much rubber stamps it. In 30 years, PJ said only 2 tenure and promotion decisions have ever been overturned. We want that kind of power for the Salary Equity Review Committee, where faculty and not compensation services that knows nothing about the conditions of our work, how to evaluate our CVs and so on, they are making these ridiculous decisions, which are driven by the algorithm that Jackson Lewis created for us. We instead want faculty control by creating the CERC as this committee that makes the final decision. So that's going to be really important for getting real pay equity at Rutgers. So that's one point. And the other has to do with the University Committee on Diversity, Race, and Gender. We won that committee as a product of the contract last time, but unfortunately that committee only has advisory and recommendation capacity, which means we can't force anything. So even though we have a $500,000 budget And Donna explained how we're trying to do dissertation diversity fellowships. We're trying to do compensated labor and so forth. We have to go from pillar to post to actually make this happen. And so one of the things that we really want to do is to empower the UCD so that all of these great DEI initiatives that management has, come up with are actually things that are accountable, right? So many of us put in cluster hire proposals. How did this go forward? Who got selected? Who didn't get selected? God knows, right? Target of opportunity hires. Who manages to get one? Who doesn't? So there's absolutely no transparency, as a result of which in the DEI circles that I'm a part of, there's discussion of how this is a clientelist kind of model, right? Whoever knows somebody actually managed to get something, which is not how a university should operate. And so transparency around these programs is something that the UCD should be fighting for and should be empowered to actually collect information around.
Thank you, Deepa. And Deepa, since leading our contract fight, has led our implementation fight on many of these issues. I have iSchool. I think, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
No, that's totally good. Thanks for the opportunity to talk, ask my question. So I have a question about the postdocs. So, I mean, are you gonna thinking to do something about the retirement plan for the postdocs? Because Rutgers doesn't consider as a real employee, and as a J1 visa holder, they're not giving us any kind of retirement plan, which is a really big issue in my opinion. So are you thinking to do something in this topic?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And I think I saw Jenny Timms here, and I'm not sure if Andres, our postdoc vice president, is here. I was gonna mention that postdocs, please do fill out your bargaining survey, which is with you right now. Jenny or Andres, if you're here and want to jump in, you can. But yeah, Jenny, you want to respond on that?
Yes, so we have conducted the postdoc survey and it's still open. So please, if you haven't filled it out yet, please do so. And yes, the retirement issue is a very big point on our list. And a lot of people have voiced concerns about it, including me. So it is definitely one of the bigger points we try to get to drive home, really, that other institutions manage to give retirement options to international students or postdocs, and are a lot better than Rutgers currently is. So we're working on it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is my second postdoc, and I'm coming from Virginia, and I had a really good retirement benefit in there, but I could not even transfer my money, which is not good. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I will encourage you to keep in touch with our postdoc leadership iSchool, and I think there's likely to be a town hall coming up in a couple of weeks, so there'll be a good opportunity to talk about priorities, and having examples from other states is good because it shines a light on Rutgers administration has a habit of saying things aren't possible, it's not our fault, our hands are tied, and we know that a lot of the time their hands are not tied. And so having these examples like yours is great. Maria, you wanna go ahead and jump in?
Hi, I just wanted to give a little feedback, but ask a question also. If there was room in negotiations to address some of the unpaid labor that grads wind up having to do, particularly around teaching. I don't know if other places, other groups do better at training to teach than my particular situation and others I've heard about, but you know, you go from a TA ship to sometimes getting put in charge of your own lecture with not a lot of formal prep and how to do pedagogy. And that winds up costing me a lot of time and others a lot of time in terms of being effective teachers that I don't think gets addressed substantially enough. And in terms of feedback, I wanted to say, I really like this idea of doing something about rent stabilization in New Brunswick. It's critical. We've got a lot of grad students that hurt around the cost of housing. So thanks.
That's great, thanks. I don't know if Alex or Sarah wants to jump in on the first point that you mentioned. We can make sure that also we follow up with you. I think I know Alex and other grad leaders, as well as our always hardworking staff, have tried to do work around, we see it as a contract enforcement issue when you do have contractual hours and your work should not be, consistently above those hours. But I think if there are ways that we should be tightening that language and making sure it's not being ignored or abused, we should absolutely do that. Shanika, I think, yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Maria.
Hi. Thank you for all of your hard work. And the question that I have is, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate forum for it, but I've been, since the time I came to the faculty, I've really struggled to use the benefits that are available to me, largely because of the infrastructure of the organizations, like the healthcare organization, for example. So like finding quality dentists, finding information so that you can evaluate the quality of a dentist, access to, accurate information about who's in network and who's not in network and those kinds of things that tend to be characteristic of the healthcare system. But my point is, I think I just want to raise the issue that it's very difficult to use some of the benefits that we have available to us. And I'm wondering to what extent, if there's any conversation about that.
Yeah, so that's a really, really helpful feedback. Thank you. We have our executive director, Patrick Nolan, who's amazing, who many of you know, sits on the State Health Benefits Plan board. And Sherry just put his email in the chat. It would be great to follow up with him directly for at least two reasons. One is he can sometimes help you navigate, and the other is that he can give the feedback to the state and say there aren't enough dentists, or there might be enough dentists, but we don't know how to find out if there are. So it would be great if you could follow up with Patrick. We'll make sure that connection happens, and we can figure out what we can do. And it might be partly at the bargaining table and partly with our relationships with the state. That's really, really helpful feedback. I see Oren with his hand up, and we're just about, I think I'm going to have Oren say what he has to say, and then we'll wrap things up. So bring us home strong, Oren.
All right. First of all, I do want to thank everyone for that work, and I'm a huge fan of that unity idea. I want to ask a little bit for the grad students. First of all, as far as workspace and office space and stuff like that, that applies to us too. Some grad students do quite extensive teaching, even if you do somehow manage to stay to the 15 hours. And I understand sometimes grad students teach a course, an actual course, which, by the way, I think, if you look at the yearly average, one thing we could do is say, if the department wants you to teach a course, then you teach one semester out of the two that you, whatever, we work something into that flexibility. But that enforcement of those hours are really tricky sometimes, and I like the idea of the tightening. I think the significance of the whatchamacallit, but I do think that when it comes to the workspace, I think it's something that needs to be acknowledged to the graduate student workers as well. And I do know that the plight of the extension is very, very strong. Very, very strong for all graduate students.
Yeah, thank you, Oren. That's a great, those are really important points. And this has all been great, great help and great feedback. So I want to just wrap us up with a few final reminders. I think I want to first of all thank everybody for coming, and for those of you who have stayed, thank you. You'll hear much more about our Rutgers Has the Money, dig into Rutgers finances, but I like what Michelle's saying. We will know more detail about Rutgers having the money, but we already know Rutgers has the money. Let's talk about how we want to address that, how we want to call out the priorities that Rutgers currently has. A couple of other things, and I hope people will put these links in the chat as I mention things. Anybody who works with our adjunct siblings, which is, I think, probably everybody here, whether you're faculty or grad or counselor, please encourage your PTL colleagues, your adjunct colleagues, to sign their cards for the One Faculty campaign. Once the adjuncts, a majority of them have signed these cards to merge our bargaining units, we'll go ahead and bring this demand to Rutgers administration, and it's going to take all of us. Adjuncts are teaching at multiple universities. They don't have office space, a common theme. They're sometimes hard to reach. And so we want to make sure that we have conversations with adjuncts and encourage them to sign these cards. So I hope someone can share that in the chat. Those of you that work with postdocs, please, please, please encourage them to fill out that bargaining survey. You can fill out the feedback from the topics today, and we will take a look. That'll be another opportunity. That there will be many opportunities, but that will be one more opportunity to hear from you. And I want to just thank everybody. We need to be talking to each other. We need to be thinking through what we're willing to do. We need to be explaining to all of our colleagues who haven't come to a contract campaign town hall what we're fighting for and what we need to do to win these demands. So we're really dependent on everybody doing their part and being willing to step up. So that's where we are now. There'll be a lot more. There's a question in the chat about other topics and areas. Evan, feel free to send to me or to our union general email address, and it'll get filtered to me or to members of our bargaining team. There's a lot more that we'll be doing that we didn't have time to get into today, but we will make a lot of opportunities to roll out specifics of our contract demands so that people have an opportunity to say more and to organize together around them. This video will be made available, and also the slides. And those of you that are department reps will be working on some department rep information to share as well. So I want to thank everybody. We'll leave the Zoom open for a few more minutes. I'll put a little music on, and maybe we can go off spotlight and